Go ahead, Eric.
Yes. I don't think anybody here is saying unions in this city should now start organizing for a general strike. What I thought I was saying, and people were agreeing with, is we need to start discussing the general strike. And in particular, revolutionaries and socialists would say that the general strike, in which the working class brings all society to a halt, shows that we, the working class, can make things run and we can make things stop. It raises but does not answer the question of workers' power in the state. Answering that question, that workers must take state power, is the job of a revolutionary socialist party. I have some other comments, which is, let me first say that I stand second to nobody in my hatred for Roger Toussaint, who, among other things, pulled a Stalinist show trial on me for allegedly telling people not to pay their dues. Nothing could be further from the truth. Having said that, let me say that in fundamentals, there are no political differences between Roger Toussaint and John Samuelson, the current president of the local. Both of them loved lobby days. Get buses full of workers and send them to Democratic politicians in Albany or in Washington. They're our friends, right? Or they could be. Both of them got together these shows, press opportunities of so-called community leaders and so-called transit advocates who in fact had no mass base and said, oh, this shows that we're on the side of the community, of the city's working class, shows that we're on their side against fare hikes and service cuts. Yes, on paper. There is now, in the union, something called fast track. You may have heard of it or been very much inconvenienced by it, where you will have...
So that's the TA.
Yeah, that's the TA. That's a TA doing this, where you will have hundreds and hundreds of track and other workers pretty much in the same place at the same time, under conditions that are not terribly safe. And the union is not sending personnel, to my knowledge, I hope I'm wrong, is not taking advantage of what to me, as a unionist, would look like an excellent opportunity, as we have a damn contract pending, to get out and talk to the workers and try to organize what we can against safety violations. It's all in Albany and practically nothing that I can see, and I hope I'm wrong, into the tunnels.
Unless there's another, I'll throw it back to the speakers to wrap up, and then we can kind of stick around if people want to have more informal discussions. Also, I just wanted to point out this panel was sponsored by the International Socialist Review, so if people want to get a copy of that as well, that'd be great. You can either get it here or there, or there's also people with them downstairs. Right back to
All right. First on there are a lot of dynamics in terms of the political low point that our union is now at the rank and file level. Some of it has to do with young people coming into the workplace now are not as schooled on what the union is. I mean, when I first started working for transit 30 years ago, I had disagreements with the very concrete ideas about what some of my coworkers had about what a union was. You have workers entering transit now who have no idea of what a union is. That's one. Two is we're coming off a very bad period. We struck in 2005. And in terms of the organization of that strike, it was thoroughly at the rank and file. I am thankful I had the privilege to be one of the organizers of that strike. But it is also a fact that Roger Toussaint surrendered while we were winning. And this is not an assessment of what we got. When you come off strike and you go back to work with no offer on the bargaining table, you have surrendered. Okay? This has great reverberations for years to come. The third thing is that, in general, American workers don't understand neoliberalism. American workers don't understand the nature of the attack coming at them. And they don't have, and this is, I think that some of us who have been in the workplace for a long time, we didn't do enough of this in terms of the next generation. And in terms of the question you asked about TWU and UFT, you're talking about two completely different histories. Probably the UFT is the most challenged of the union, of the public unions in New York City. One, retirees vote in their elections. More retirees vote than current members. And there's a lot of backward people in Miami and Tel Aviv that vote in UFT. Yes, in UFT elections. You know, and in terms of its relation to working class communities, the last militant action of the UFT was the hate strike of 1968. Now, I was never a teacher or anything like that, but I was one of those kids in Ocean Hill-Brownsville, okay? It was me that they were calling apes and animals, and you had these teachers issuing corporal punishment in the 1960s. The further experience, just in terms of me, it is really tedious for a 5-year-old kindergartner to come home and have to recount every detail of his day to his parents and grandparents because they want to discern the racism that his 5-year-old mind might not be able to understand. This is the context. That was the strike that actually put the AFT on the map. Everything that they've built on since then comes from them not being acting as a real labor organization, but a counter-class labor organization. It was an incident post-CIO of them actually acting as the workers' movement for white supremacy. Given also that the teaching profession was part of the apparatus of white supremacy in this country. As more people of color got educations, they transformed some of those organizations and some of those relationships. But it's still in process in many places. And so it's, I guess I use a lot of words to say that the UFT is a particularly hard nut and particularly backward. And so the fact is that I don't think that there's anything quickly that's going to happen organizationally. My project now, because my time with transit is down to the single digits, okay? In other words, less than 10, all right? I've got 30 years in. Is to try to find people several decades younger than myself and try to put at least some leadership in place to prepare them for a long march. Nothing the Samuelson regime could do, even if they corrected some of their mistakes, there's nothing that they could do in the immediate that's going to radically change our situation. It's a movement thing. It's a thing that we have to concentrate on at the bottom. And it's even more of a challenge in the teachers' union here in New York.
Well, is it true that we
Yeah.
I
Yes, you can.
because we didn't do that.
If there's any one theme about this meeting, it's about the nature of this attack, this qualitative change. It's been emerging for some time. It was piloted in the 70s, has now gone global, really, and obviously that cries out for a general response, like a general strike. And just an anecdote from Wisconsin when I was involved, after it became clear that they were going to try to move the budget bill to the fore, we're sitting in the restaurant with some ISO comrades, and for the first time in nearly 30 years in the ISO, we discussed, should we put out a leaflet calling for a general strike? Are we crazy? And then another comrade came back on the table and said, you know what, those building trades workers over there are talking about whether there should be a general strike. And it was there because it was a total, kind of a total visceral attack, and the instinct was for a response in kind. But then the question was how it would be organized. Now, something like that might have been detonated had they pushed through the legislation that the Democrats hadn't gotten out. Something like that really could have started to spread, industrial actions of various sorts. And in fact, it did start to develop with the teachers, and the vote for the teachers to go back to work in Madison, which set the stage for everybody else, was a 10-vote difference, right? So, had there been some radicals and militants in that local who were prepared to say, no, we need to stay out, this is what the stakes are, otherwise we're headed to oblivion, and today their parent union has lost half its staff as a result of this big defeat. So, so that's the stakes we're in, and the general strike would be a tremendous step forward, a radically transforming step in this country. But it's also within the frame, you have to look at it in terms of what the employers are willing to go for right now. In Greece, they've had, close to 20 general strikes by now. And what the employer class is basically telling them, either directly in Greece or through the unelected bureaucrats imposed on them by the European Union and the European Central Bank and so on, is that you're basically going to have to take power if you want to stop this. You're going to have to storm the parliament, kick us out, occupy the factories, because we're going to keep relentlessly, keeps coming and coming and coming. And a general strike, in some sense, is almost a way of letting off steam, because the only way of actually taking through is a revolutionary type of struggle. And obviously, this crisis is much worse in Greece and other parts of the world than here. But the program is general. It's relentless. And in terms of capital's perspective, the only way that they're going to be able to contain the rise of China, they thought they could do it by simply outsourcing and so forth, contain Japan's economic threat by using China as an export platform. Well, guess what? Now China's the threat. So this idea about reindustrializing manufacturing and so on is there. That means an intensification of the employer's offensive right down the line and ratcheting down of both wages that you get in your paycheck, but also the social wages, in terms of what's available to you in terms of public services, the schools your kids can go to, and so forth. So I think Tim's right. It's the long march. I think it's going to be punctuated with explosions, and I'm going to say it's going to be incremental here and there. There'll be all kinds of showdowns and fights that we can't foresee. It might be in Chicago in the teachers' union. It might be someplace else. But those have to be the rallying points to come around. And understanding the unions that we're dealing with is important. I think the AFT was actually a product of a rank and file uprising, and then took this hard right turn. It's described. There was a massive wave of teacher strikes throughout the mid-1960s, and then actually the union turning its back on the Black Power movement, which was the cutting edge of the radicalization, cut short the union of its potential and led to the kind of split that Tim described in the 1970s. So who's in the unions and the leadership matters, but in the end, unions are about negotiating the terms of exploitation under capitalism. We want those terms to get better for our side, but in the end, that's why we need socialist organization, we need the left, we need the rebirth of the kind of radicalism that Tim described. We talked about the early years of the CIO, which the Communist Party was the principal part of that, the various Trotskyist organizations, the Socialist Party militants, unaffiliated radicals and anarchists, all played their role in backbone of the reborn labor movement. I think that's coming out, if we had this conversation a year ago, that would have seemed very abstract. I think after what we've all been through in the last year, you can see it. You can know who the people are. I am absolutely convinced of young people today graduating from college with $30,000, $40,000 in debt, with no prospect of a job, who are damn sick and tired of taking it in some non-union, crappy retail job. They're gonna organize. Whether people in this room, it's gonna start to happen here and there. There's all kinds of interesting projects that UE is doing with some largely immigrant workers in Chicago around warehouse workers. Different projects like that are going to take some patience. Some will work, some will thrive, some may not. But we have to be organized as a left. I think socialist politics and orientation can be part of that, in order to put forward the kind of perspective that we're talking about here, which is understanding that capital has a program to radically make our lives worse. We have to be able to come together, build basic organizations of defense, the unions to draw the line, but also build within the unions a layer of activists and cadre who have a vision of a different kind of society with different priorities.
Round of applause for both our students. People should really stick around, talk more, so we can network and get involved. Thanks for coming.
So, it's going to do this. It's going to be around the executive.
That's great.
We're still patient.
I want